Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Dr. David R.L. Stevens. We'll be discussing his fantastic book, Love and Marriage for a Lifetime. Available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, or directly through authorreputationpress.com. And guys, while you're at it, that's not the only book that Dr. Stevens has written. Now, that's going to be the main anchor for today's interview. But make sure his Amazon page, Barnes & Noble, or directly through authorreputationpress.com, you look into his second book as well, and that one is entitled Parenting, Equipping Babies for a Lifetime. And if you haven't figured it out already, Dr. Stevens was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business, and they happen to be Author Reputation Press. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, make sure you're doing yourself a favor and contacting ARP. And you can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. Hey guys, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Dr. Stevens here on the line. I mean, right there in the title, there's no getting around it. You know what we're discussing today. Love and marriage for a lifetime. Now, listen, once you've gotten to a certain point in your life, you realize that we don't live in a Disney movie, right? We don't live in a rom-com. When you see people falling in love on the silver screen, right? When you watch your Disney movies, you get that nostalgic feel. You understand life doesn't actually work out that way. Okay, it's wonderful to see it happening on the screen. But see, here's the thing that the movies don't show you, and they don't tell you. The movies always end on the highest note, right? They end when people come together and they are in love, and it's wonderful, and it's magic, and it's beautiful. But what they don't tell you is all of the work and the obstacles that are still ahead on your path. You know, there's no way to just live in a Disney movie and have all of your problems solved once you come together. It'd be amazing if that were the case. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. Okay, so we know here in reality, it takes work. It takes time. It takes commitment. And there are certain rules that you should follow. And that leads us exactly to this book. Now listen, Dr. Stevens is the expert. He's done the research. He's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Dr. Stevens, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, listen, the pleasure is all ours. Now, we're very much looking forward to this and looking forward to the words of wisdom that you're going to be able to relay to our listening audience. Now, before we go into the book, let's hold off slightly. Dr. Stevens, start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Well, okay, I've been a pastor for actually about 52 years, and out of the working with people, my wife and myself, we got into counseling couples and counseling actually folks before they became couples. And it just seemed to be a natural process to begin making note of some of the things that were occurring and some of the solutions and answers to situations. And this is how we got started as writers.
Well, without further ado, Love and Marriage for a Lifetime. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Yes, well, you notice the first word is love, and the second word, I guess, afterhand, is marriage. And so I was able to convince the publishers to split this book into 2 volumes in one, which is unusual because, you know, most publishers want to do one and then another and then another. But I felt that it would be a great tool to talk about marriage before marriage, which is the love aspect, and the principles of falling in love, what you should look for, what you should make part of your decision whether you go forward with the marriage or not. And then after marriage, some of the things that are expected to happen, some of the things that are in our control, and some of the responses to those things that are not under our control. So that's how we actually put the book together. And then, of course, we'll just drop in some information that there is a third book or a third volume in the form of a book that comes as a result of the love and marriage. We talk about having children and imparting the important principles of raising those children.
Now, Dr. Stevens, let's talk about inspiration for a second. Now, I know you've already started to go into it, but I'm curious, what were you seeing in your background, in your expertise, that made you feel that a book of this magnitude, and specifically talking about love and marriage for a lifetime, what were you seeing that made you feel that this book would be beneficial to the public at large?
You know, I could really say the COVID, right, really made an impact that this book needed to get out at this time. But actually, it started long before COVID. I noticed that there were a lot of things that were built on trying this and trying that, and it really didn't have to be that way. I always tell people that the marriage maker is God, and he left a manual for our success. And if we would just kind of learn some of those things that are already written for us and follow the path of success, we could have great success for a lifetime. So that's where the inspiration came from.
Listen, next question that I'd love to go into, and my listening audience is going to get upset with me if I don't hurry up and ask it, okay? Now, we know, Dr. Stevens, that unfortunately, the divorce rate is just absolutely astronomical. I mean, it's skyrocketing, and it just continues to go up. Now, in your expertise, what words of wisdom? Now, I know your book is loaded with tips, but since we have you here on the line, any tips, any words of wisdom that you'd be able to offer any couples out there listening in finds themselves maybe hitting a rough patch, what would you be able to say to them to either A, get their relationship back on track, or maybe any single people out there looking to get into a relationship, and words of caution that they should look out for or prepare for?
Okay, that's a good question, and that's exactly why the book is divided into two sections. First, we talk to the single people on what to look for in a relationship. You know, it's all right to say, "Oh, I love this person. They're just the greatest thing since apples and cheese." You know, it's wonderful, but there are some practical things that we have to look at in terms of whether the love is legitimate or foundational. And if you avoid looking at these things and making your assessment on the way these things line up, you're headed for not too good a future. Of course, many people ignore all of those signs and all of those things that would kind of help them make a better selection. All right, so that's for single people. Then married people, as I said before, are going to come across things that they don't understand. And how you respond to the things you don't understand is important. For instance, one of the great things that I do when I am in counseling, I think it's great. I shock my two people who are entering into the counseling area with me. I tell them, you know, I've come to the understanding that men and women are different. Well, the looks that I get, they think, hey, man, I came in to talk to this guy who's supposed to be wise and all of this, and he's telling me that we're different. We know that. And then I laugh, and then I go into some of the things that are important to understand. We men are different from the ladies, and we think differently. We respond pretty much most of the time differently, and so I try to teach them to try to understand who they are, why they are, and then who the other person is and why they are who they are. And as we begin to develop an understanding, then we're on sort of a common ground, and we can understand, and we can say, oh, well, okay, your feeling is a little bit different. Let's find common ground. Let's find a place that we can compromise. Let's find a place that we can both of us take time out and say, okay, this is what we'll work on.
Again, here on the line with Dr. David R.L. Stevens. We're discussing his fantastic book, Love and Marriage for a Lifetime, available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, or directly through the publishing company, AuthorReputationPress.com. Now, Dr. Stevens, next question I want to go into, in addition to your own experience, what type of research did you do in developing this book?
Certainly, I had to understand what the Bible was saying. Again, I said that God is a marriage maker, and he made us to be different, and that's not an accident. That's on purpose. And so I had to become quite knowledgeable about things in the scriptures. And then I had to find a way of communicating this so that people could understand. Sometimes I have to confess, sometimes the Bible comes off in a way that it says something and people look in awe. What in the world are they or is it talking about? So I have to find ways of communicating, breaking it down so that I can understand first, so that I can communicate it to those persons that I'm working with, and then that they can understand it and make it so that they can work it out in their relationship.
I'm curious, what would you say was a highlight for you in writing this book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting prior to embarking upon the journey?
Well, actually, the surprise was, and I've written quite a few books, but in working with this particular representative of the publishing company, I was surprised that he took personal interest in the things that I was trying to do, and gave me a lot of guidance and a lot of focus on where we could make this book a bestseller. And so that has been part of what we're striving to do. Because let's face it, I've been at this 40-some years. And because of that, I have a lot of accumulated wisdom. And my goal is to try and share it as far and as wide as I possibly can. So that's hopefully an answer to your question there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And last question here. Being an artist myself, I love having this platform to be able to pay it forward, in a sense, to other artists out there listening in. Any words of wisdom that you could relay to a new writer, somebody out there just starting out that's listening in, what words of wisdom would you like to relay to them?
Well, it's always good to get advice from someone who's been through it. And I really want to say that that way, because sometimes people get advice from people who are just kind of winging it through. They haven't done it, but they're full of advice to you. Oh, I wouldn't do that. Or that's not. I think there's a gut feeling that says, I would like to do something to be of help, for instance, to someone else, and then start out with that in mind, and then look. I'm a man who believes in prayer. I think before we do anything and while we do anything, we ought to be praying. And I think God gives us the inspiration to go through. And then, thirdly, find somebody who has done it or is doing it. Try to get as much advice, helpful advice as you can get, and then set your face like a rock and go for it, because people many times will tell you, oh, you can't do that, or that has never been done before. But if you feel it and you feel like it is something that should be done, then get the best advice, do the research, do everything that you can do to perfect your craft and go for it.
There you have it. There you have it. Guys, you know what I love so much about this? Is we're at the end of the interview now, and we've discussed so much information, yet we've barely scratched the surface. There's still so much left to be discovered. You know what you have to do. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, AuthorReputationPress.com are the places you have to go. Love and Marriage for a Lifetime. And while you're at it, pick up Parenting, Equipping Babies for a Lifetime, Volume 3. Those are the titles you have to pick up. And Dr. David R.L. Stevens is the author you have to thank for bringing each of these wonderfully informative narratives to your table. Guys, let's grow, let's develop, let's educate ourselves. And it starts with these fantastic books. Dr. Stevens, this has been truly a pleasure and such an honor. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed myself.